Everyone, what's going on? Welcome to episode 8 of Check the Wire. Myself, Dan Giesling, Ryan, Gary, Northernlion, the Turner. What's going on, man?
Doing well as usual. Excited to be here. How about you?
Dude, I was 30 seconds before we started recording. I'm like, this is cool. Essentially what the podcast is, more or less, is we just get to kind of hang out for an hour and we follow like a loose couple bullet points. But I'm excited about it, man. I just look forward to this every week. And it's been cool to read a lot of the feedback. But before we jump in, what's been the highlight of your past 7?
Honestly, the reaction to the last episode of the podcast was really good. You know, we talked about some real stuff like fatherhood in particular on it. And I thought that, it feels weird to be vulnerable on the internet sometimes, especially because for me in particular, I hide behind like a layer of irony. So to have that go out was a little bit anxiety inducing, and then to see the response from the community was super positive was really nice.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'd never there's a lot of things I don't talk about, but it just felt like this is, I guess, the one venue where I'm willing to open up a little bit, just because I'm very similar to you. I'm really goofy and stuff online, and it's just a very inverse of how I am in real life. I just like to keep a lot of things private, but I'm the same way. Like I didn't know if people would be like, oh, I didn't want to listen to this, but it's kind of, I think I think it's the point of the podcast is kind of peel back the curtain a little bit and talk about all that stuff going on. Speaking of peeling the curtain back, though, we both had a topic on the top of this list, and it was talking about killing a series, whether on Twitch or YouTube, and how we go about making that decision, because it's a pretty important decision for a lot of reasons. But when it comes to starting a series and then ending it, what goes through your mind in doing that? What's been your history with that as well?
Well, for context here, we both got a teardrop tattoo this week because we killed the same series. We both killed Exit the Gungeon. So, I have a history with this stretching back like a long, long time when it comes to killing series. Whether like some series I've killed maybe at the right time, some I've killed too early perhaps, and some I've let go on way after they became like zombified and probably should have stopped. Like for Slay the Spire, when I started playing that, it was a lot of fun. I committed to I'm going to beat Ascension 20, which is this super difficult challenge with all characters. I had like 6 months of daily videos with no progress before I actually finally managed to crack through that. But for Exit the Gungeon, it was kind of, it was disappointing, honestly, because I think you and I have both talked that, we both like the game, and I think it's reasonably fun to watch for sure. I know it's not Enter the Gungeon level. Like Enter the Gungeon is a classic, but sometimes there's that divergence. The audience doesn't like it, but the creator does. So for me, unfortunately, well, I'm giving a little bit more backstory here, but I came off of Stone Shard, which was like 30 episodes and went relatively well. But definitely when I looked at my March analytics, I was like, it's a little lower. And I think the reason it was a little lower than February is instead of having like multiple series kind of churning out a little slower, Stone Shard really dominated like one time slot for the whole month, and the natural kind of downward slope of the views on that affected it. So my resolution for like late March and April was start to move things a little faster. So when Exit the Gungeon came out, the first episode was like, hey, this is like pretty good. And then the second episode was just crickets. Like not and I hate to say it because like 25,000 people watched it or something like that, which is flattering in and of itself when you put it in those terms. But I was like, ooh, that's like, those are the numbers that Stone Shard was getting like around the end. And this is the second episode. So unfortunately for me, it was just kind of like looking at the analytics and being like, this is a business, and this clearly is not satisfying enough of my viewers to really justify taking that spot. But how about you?
Well, before I talk about that on my end, I want to ask you about Spire, because how many you end up doing? Like, didn't you do like 400 plus episodes, or did I make?
It's got to be like, it might be 600, it might be 650, somewhere in there.
So when you decided to keep that going, was it because the support was there and you were kind of the one checking out? Not that you would check out in a video, but the support was still there, so you kept going? Or
I think like Slay the Spire, I honestly think that game is kind of like a unicorn. I think it's well respected for sure. I think a lot of people do sleep on it though. I think it's up there in the evergreen level with like Isaac, Spelunky, games like that where that can be your game. Mm-hmm. Like there's people on YouTube, and I just wasn't good enough to be one of them for one. But good enough at Spire, at least, to be one of them. But there's people on YouTube who are crushing it, and their thing is they just play Slay the Spire. They release like a video or 2 videos a day of really high level play, engaging like analytical thought processes and stuff like that. So for me, it was partly that I loved the game so much that it didn't feel like it ever became a drag to play, even when it was probably spiritually dragging me down a little bit. But then the game is literally just one of those like once every 2 or 3 years kind of like legendary, endlessly replayable games. So for me, that actually, in a way, it almost let me play longer than I should have because the game's quality masked the analytics side of it more.
So you saw like towards the end, you saw the analytics were dying off, and were you at that point were you already fully committed to reaching Ascension 20 that you didn't want to back down?
It was a chore, not in a bad way, but in the way that's like, I don't care how low the numbers get for this. I'm going to knock this out. Because if I don't knock it out, I'm going to always be left with the fact that I left that open. And I was like, the next run could be it. The next run could be it. But the other, I guess the flip side of it is, we talk a lot about how like episode 1 is usually like 4 times what the average viewership of your episode is or something like that. And then it dips. But the flip side of that is once you burn it all out, you're kind of just at a floor that doesn't go away as well. So it's not like it sank like linearly for a year and a half. It went like, pew, and then it kind of petered out over time. So it isn't as bad once you've made that commitment for a long term, I guess. But it hurts a lot more in the beginning for sure.
Before we talk about my thoughts on it, was there any part of you that didn't want to cut it at like Ascension 19 because of dealing with the constant maybe poking from the community that you didn't do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been my my philosophy on a lot of stuff lately, probably for like 3 or 4 years. I'm like, now back in 2015, 2016, I would start something and then like I get like 90% of the way through. And it's always like, as a content creator, it's always easy to promise stuff. It's always easy to be like, I'm going to do this because it's fun. And then you like lose a couple of times and you're like, it's not so fun. And then just kind of like let it fester a little bit. So I don't have a commitment necessarily to 100%ing everything I play because that's not realistic for me and my entertainment style. But I'm better about setting the expectation now of like, this is what I'm going to do. And if I say I'm going to do it, you can be confident that I'm going to do it. If I say I'm not going to do it, don't pester me because it's just, I'm not going to wear down.
Yeah.
But how about you? How was your Exit the Gungeon experience?
Yeah, so Exit the Gungeon was very similar. The first one came out like I'd say pretty consistent with everything else on like an episode 1. And I really like the game because I like platformers, I like roguelikes, and it took like some familiar characters and elements and everything. And I remember doing the first video, I'm like, man, this game's really fun. I'm like, let me just see what they got on Metacritic or what the reviews were. And it was like all just bashing it. And I think there was just different expectations for the game, but I was just really surprised so much so. I think we talked about this. I sent you a message. I'm like, hey, what'd you think of Gungeon? Exit the Gungeon? You're like, yeah, it was good. I'm like, oh, look, so I'm not, off base about thinking the game's good. And then it got to like episode 2 or 3 and it was kind of like a mass exodus. And the thing that's funny that you talk about is that when you say that, I don't mean it in a demeaning way to people that like the series because like you, I'm super grateful that people even care to watch it. But, like you said, you have to make a tough business decision. And I think before, my stance on YouTube is a little different than on Twitch. On YouTube, I'm still figuring stuff out, which I want to talk a little bit later. I didn't put on the notes about editing videos, but I'm still figuring it out, right? I don't really necessarily have a set cadence. I'm trying a lot of new things. But on Twitch, I approach things very, very differently. I almost choose like game selection and ending a series as like something that doesn't happen because it's almost when I pick a game on YouTube, on Twitch to play, people expect it to be not 100% but beaten and finished. And so I'm fortunate that the selections I've made, I haven't got into a point where it's like, all right, I didn't finish it because I just feel like it sets a tone that I don't want to set. On the flip side, I've never luckily had a complete bomb on Twitch where it was like the wrong move. So, but one of the things that helped me kind of figure that out is I'll sneak in a game for an hour before I consider playing it just to see the reaction. So I'm not in that position where I'm like 30% into a game and I'm like pulling my hair out that this isn't good. But on YouTube, I just found that shorter stuff has done a lot better. And so, but I did feel oddly bad about just ending the Exit the Gungeon series. Do you ever like feel bad about it? Like when you end something?
Here's the way I've come to think about it. Because I think if you're listening to this and you're like one of the hundreds or even thousands of people that liked watching Exit the Gungeon, you kind of feel, I don't want to say betrayed, but you feel a little bad about it. You're like, oh, I guess my attention isn't that important.
Right.
The way I've come to think about it is that, you know, it seems very cynical to be like the numbers weren't there. So kind of regardless of the quality, we're going to cancel the series. The way I think of it now is more like that once the series has had its moment in the spotlight, you know, over the course of like 5 or 6 days, the majority of people that watch my stuff on the regular have had a chance to look at it and kind of vote with their eyeballs whether or not they're gonna keep watching it. I look at that as almost like an approval rate or something like that. So if it comes out and like the first video gets 80,000 views and the second gets 25,000 views, I look at that and I go, that's my audience voting that like they don't want to see that. So the way I choose to look at it is that it's better for the community and for me to try to cycle things in that time slot that instead would get more people interested in watching the content instead of like, oh, that's not making me enough money, so I'm just going to cut it out of like malice. It's more like, you know, people, it's like bringing something to a potluck. And if like day one, you bring like a macaroni salad and then at the end of the potluck, it's 95% full. You're like, I'm not going to bring a macaroni salad next time, even though Uncle Jim is like, you make my favorite macaroni salad. You got to make something that's a little bit more conducive to the whole environment, I guess.
one of the tangible things that I've taken from you that you did, and I want to say it's maybe in the past 9 months or 12 months, you started putting something at the end of your series, was like parentheses X or 7/X.
Yeah.
And I took that and I think that's a great way to communicate what's going on. And so, for example, it'll say like episode 1 of X, meaning that there's no, like there's going to be an end. We just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah.
And I started doing that with like a series like Stone Shard. I really liked it. It didn't do so well on my channel, but I committed. It was like 1 of 7. So I know if I put that number in there, even if it's a bomb, I'm still going to complete it to 7 just because I don't know. I don't like leaving hanging stuff out there, but I felt like that was, and I think to kind of put an important takeaway from this, I think the most important thing for me on my end is that as long as I communicate what's going on and just don't ghost someone and leave the DM on red, then I think it's okay, you know. But I like your mindset on in terms of the voting with your eyeballs, because there's a lot of times I'll put something out there like, hey, what do you want to see, whether on like the YouTube Facebook wall or the YouTube community wall. And ultimately, like I get a lot of good feedback, but ultimately it's kind of like what you said. People don't necessarily need to respond because they respond. If I really want to know what people want to watch, I'll just go and sort the videos by view for the past month. And I've ever since we looked at our analytics, I'm doing that a lot more and like poking around and just it's almost like you're trying to drive the car in a certain direction and you don't know where to drive it, but then you open the glove box and people are like, here's where we want you to take us. Just do more of this forehead.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And like, you know, I watch a lot of your content while I'm playing Animal Crossing on the couch. And I think if you had asked people like, what do you want me to play? Probably would have gotten 0 requests to play Polybridge, a 5 or 6 year old like bridge building simulator. But like when I was watching that video, I was like, this is really good content. And it actually, I'm glad you brought up that you wanted to bring this up as well, because I was like, oh, Dan, and I watched the Guts and Glory one as well, like the 3D Happy Wheels one.
Which I think that'll be a great Golden Goblet game. But anyway, sorry to cut you off.
Dude, I was thinking that when I was watching it actually. But I was like, oh, he's trying something new with like the first looks that he's doing. If anybody has not watched Dan's like variety content recently, now it seems like what you're doing is you're putting like a 30-second bumper at the front that's like, here's what the game is about. And maybe you're including like a funny clip from later in the video there to kind of set the context for it. And then you're also editing out like maybe the boring stuff. It's hard to tell because I don't see what ends up on the cutting room floor. But yeah. I thought that was interesting. And I'm interested in hearing your thought process there.
Yeah, I don't know where the Polybridge came from. So I saw there was an announcement for Polybridge 2. So I'm like, all right, let me look up this game. And I'm like, all right, this is completely out of what I would ever play because it's very cerebral, or what I thought was cerebral, an engineering type game. You got to think a lot and low distribution. But I'm like, let's just try it. You know, I think it was $1.50 on Steam. So I tried it, and I'm like, man, I was recording it. I'm like, I was enjoying it, and there's some really funny parts, but there's a lot of snoozy parts as well. And so I said, you know what, it's kind of like my motto for everything, just try something different and see if it works, because it's going to do either worse or better than everything I'm already doing. So it was an odd thing. I'm like, all right, well, if I never had seen this game before, I want to see some of the best parts of the video right away so I can see if I want to continue to watch. And so I did that. I put it together, and I found a really funny thing. You know, number one, the response was really, really good. But number two, I found myself enjoying the video, and I felt more proud of that particular episode. And I was more apt to share it because I felt good about it. Like, I felt like, hey, man, this is good. And I enjoyed the process. I took out the parts that I wouldn't watch myself because it's boring. And I just tried to make it more entertaining. And I think what it made me realize is that everyone's very different. Like, you and I have a lot of similarities, but also very different in the content. Like, you can successfully put out a video that's 30, 45, 60 minutes, and you can keep that going for a long time, and people want to watch it. I can't do that. That's not my strength. Can I have really funny moments and keep people going and entertain? Yeah, but I'm going to need to like present that in a certain way. And so that's really what I took from it. And I think the biggest takeaway out of everything was, even if that Polybridge video didn't do well, I learned that I enjoyed editing the video, which in the back of my head, I'm always like, oh man, when you talk about people editing videos, it sounds like such a bore and stuff like this. And it got to the point too where, so I did that, and I did the bike editing game, and I sent a message to Zane, who does some of my video editing stuff. And I said, hey, like, I'm going to see if I can edit this in 20 minutes or less. So I timed it. So now it's like, all right, it's exciting, and I can create, I think, a pretty good episode in 60 minutes, recording and editing it. And I'm just trying to, it's fun. It's kind of like we talk about programming too. Like, you learn new stuff, you try stuff. But for me, it was just, it's kind of like, I need to find out what works on YouTube, and I'm learning the language of YouTube that works for me. And so it was just another example of throwing something against the wall and it being a lot of fun to do.
It's interesting. Like, I don't know if it's a topic for this podcast, but I would be interested to do like an A/B comparison of like how viewer retention looks for maybe like, when you looked at like Enter the Gungeon back in January or whatever again. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't edited. I would be interested to see how like the curve of viewer retention looks for that compared to something where you set the expectation of what the viewer is going to see. I have no idea how it would bear out, but I've kind of like, and this is tangential, but I've noticed on TikTok, like, I've been trying to figure out like, okay, some of them stink, some of them do okay, some of them do really well. And I'm sure a lot of it is like timing, or I don't want to say luck, but like maybe if the first 100 people see it and more than average like it, then it gets like, it skyrockets, right? And it just snowballs. But I think part of it as well is almost like telling people what the joke is at the start of the video, if possible.
Where did you learn that? Or what of your content you put on TikTok, you said, there's something to this? Or was it something you were watching on TikTok?
I think it was just like in some of my videos, I put stuff down, or I put the video down and it didn't go so well. And I was like, maybe I'm letting the joke be like too subtle here. And then in some of the videos, I was basically like, this is the part where you should laugh. And I found that like it just got people more engaged with the content. So I'd be interested to see if it works that same way on YouTube, where, you know, the way that I do like a Northernlion tries, or a first look, is that the game kind of reveals itself naturally over like 30 minutes or 45 minutes. For you, you're like, this is what you should watch for. Like when the kid gets knocked off the back of the bike, it's hilarious. So you know when to laugh, you know? It's not my style, but I'd be interested to see how it works for you analytically.
Yeah, and that was the thing. I think it's about setting like a communication, or setting like a brand. And I think right now, if you come to my YouTube channel, you don't really know what to expect, which could be a good and bad thing. But one of the things in my head is I knew I wanted people to know it was edited, but I didn't want them to have to watch 2 minutes to figure it out. So I'm like, okay, how can I communicate to this? And it's not rocket science, but on this side of the lens, I'd never really done that before. So I'm like, well, how can you tell someone that this video is going to be a little bit different than your traditional content? We'll just make the first 20 seconds tell that it's different. And so that was something I thought about a lot, where it's just like, I don't have to tell someone. I was almost thinking about putting edited in the title. And I think I did that a couple weeks ago with a video. I'm like, hey, this Tarkov video is edited. And it was kind of like a natural progression. I think when I do that, it just sets a different expectation. And if that ends up, and I don't know if that ends up being the direction of the YouTube channel, I think it'll eventually get to a point where people will come and be like, oh yeah, I know I'm not going to see any, full stream of conscious videos, because ultimately I may phase out that it doesn't work on my side of things. But in terms of TikTok, I'm the same way, man. Like I look at like the couple ones that I've had like blow up, like one with 1 million views on TikTok. I'm like, it's really, there's nothing to it. Like it's not what I would consider one of my best TikToks. It's just me missing a bunch of shots in Tarkov and saying, hey, I'm missing shots in Tarkov. That was essentially it. But I don't know. I just, that's the thing. But I feel the same way about TikTok as I do now video editing. It's exciting and I enjoy it. Which kind of, to circle back to you, you're doing some edited content on your YouTube channel with your Twitch clips, right?
Yeah. And I like what you said about that, actually, because I hadn't thought about it, but it resonated with me. Where, first off, I always thought it was a chore, but it really doesn't take that long. Mm-hmm. Like I've got a great funnel going here right now by accident. After like every stream, or maybe like 5 times a week, I'll go to this website called Twitch Tracker, and I'll look at like my most viewed clips over the past few days. And then I download the clips and I go, which one of these would make good TikToks? Because some of them is just me ranting for like 90 seconds and it doesn't go. I've tried it on TikTok and people are like, I'm bored. And I understand that's fair. But some of them are good. So I like edit those and I put them up on TikTok. Then at the end of the month, I already have like 30 to 50 clips of the best content from that month. So I don't even have to go through the legwork of like manually downloading 50 clips. I've already done it. To put that in, I use a program called Adobe Premiere Rush, which is just, it's Premiere, but it's like much, much, much simpler, which is bad because you can't do a lot of stuff. Like, this is a little bit inside baseball, but one of the things you can do in Premiere Pro is like unlink an audio and video track so that you can manually move them around. Yeah. You can't do that in Premiere Rush, which is horrible. But if you're just putting clips together and like doing zooming or something like that, or putting text on top of it, it's really streamlined. So to put like 20, 25 clips into like a best of and then edit it, if you had asked me how much time would that take 6 months ago, I would have been like, that's a day's work. Easy. It's actually like an hour and a half, maybe even like 45 minutes to an hour. But then once it's made, I echo what you say, where I'm like, it turned out well. I'm proud of the way that it turned out. So after I post it, I also want to promote it, because I'm like, A, I want more people to see this because I worked a little bit harder on it. But B, I think that more people are going to enjoy it as well, because I think the content is like really good and digestible. So that's where it came from for me. And I don't know if like more edited content, I think, is unlikely. I like the idea. Like, I think from me as a video consumer, I like the idea of a shorter video with dead air edited out, and it's just a greatest hits collection of what happened over the course of like 15 minutes. But for me as a producer, I think my audience right now prefers the style that I've made over like 7 or 8 years. So I don't think I want to pivot on my style like that. But when I was watching what you were doing, I was like, oh, I like this a lot, actually.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the interesting things is that we've been at it for, I think you've been doing it for a little bit, maybe 2 years longer than me, but you have your cadence on YouTube and it works. And I just still don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out. But I think it's kind of like, what would be interesting for you is kind of what you're doing is like, you have your hamburger that you serve. And then, once a week you have like, oh, here's a special chicken sandwich, but it's not your hamburger place isn't going to change. But it was just, I don't know. And to me now it's become a game where it's like you talked about, you thought it would take an hour and a half and 45 minutes. I bet, you're going to have it down to an exact science and maybe get it to like 27 minutes at some point once you get, super dialed in with the editing. But it's just
hearing that you did yours in 20 minutes, I was like, man, what is this guy? What's he doing? He's got some tips and tricks that I need myself. That's crazy.
Well, when you said unlinking, inside baseball, like I get so much value out of being able to unlink the audio from the video, because then you can put in music and you can do all this stuff. And I'm probably using like 1% of Premiere Pro's capabilities, but I'm also excited to see what the next 10% looks like. And it's kind of one of those things where you feel good because you're learning something. I'm like, okay, hey, look, I don't know how to slow pan on something. How do I do that? You know, you go to YouTube, I watch like a 7-minute video at 2x speed. I learn it in, 3.5 minutes, implement. I'm like, okay, now I know how to do that. So I think probably at the end, whenever that is, I'll be pretty, as versed as I want to be in Premiere Pro. But at the end of the day, I think it comes back to a couple of things. One is what feels right to you, like what gets you going. And like, that's like, if I'm excited about something or a game or a process or a tool, it permeates to the viewing audience. And then the other thing is it working? And it seems to be working. And you talking about Polybridge, I'm like, it was on my list of things to do today. It's like, okay, it's been a couple days since a Polybridge. It's time to do another one. So I don't know. I think it's just following your gut and then seeing if it works. But it's been really exciting. But in terms of, I do want to just slightly pivot back to your thoughts on game selection on Twitch, which I know is a hard 180. But we talked about like killing stuff on YouTube. What about on Twitch for you?
On Twitch is really hard. Like on YouTube, I think you can kind of, I mean, maybe it's not that different, but it feels different to be in the middle of like a live environment and be like, I'm going to can this. Especially, I think you can do it as long as you set expectations well. Like some streamers I've seen that are like, just so you know, like at any given moment, this could be over. Like I could just decide arbitrarily, I'm not liking this anymore and I'm going to yeet it. But for me, I think, I take inspiration from you, honestly, on at least ending a series. I feel like what I'm putting out is my own enjoyment is secondary. What I'm actually trying to put out is like a product, for lack of a better word, that people like and have confidence in moving forward. So I don't want to like build up the reputation that like, hey, I started playing this, get excited, show up for stream 1. Maybe you give out like 10 gift subs or something like that because you're hyped that I'm playing the game. And then day 2, I'm like, this boss sucks and it's the hitbox is garbage and I just can't it. Like I would rather suffer a little bit on the inside as long as it's not affecting the quality of the product too much. And instead, on the outside, be like, I'm going to just grin and bear it and finish it. And then I'll always have that like in my tool belt that I finished this game. And then in the future, use that to inform like game selection. So like there are games like I played Bully 2 years ago on a subscriber stream. I hated every second of it. I kind of turned that hate into an enjoyment. I think the stream became a different kind of entertaining because I wasn't having very much fun at all.
Did they know? Did the audience not know that you were having fun?
Oh, they knew I hated it for sure. Okay. But I think I am one of those creators that has the ability to kind of like channel the suffering into entertainment a little bit instead of just going like, and like dead airing it. But I learned a lot from that. One of them, like that really informed my decision-making process to not just leave it up to a popular vote. And I think that's actually had like really positive implications over time, even though it sounds like it's an anti-community sort of thing. And also I was like, man, I'm not going back and playing like any game released before 2008 because A is like, things have just changed a lot. There's been a lot of like UX smoothing stuff. It's way easier to find objectives. I was getting motion sick because it ran at like 18 frames per second. And like, so I think, I think, the expression an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is like, be very choosy with the game selection and just think about, instead of thinking about how easy it is to start a game, think about how, like when you're starting it, you're actually committing to finishing it. That's been what's worked for me instead of just building a reputation as like, okay, today Animal Crossing came out. You don't really beat Animal Crossing, so it's kind of a bad example. But like next week, I'm sure thousands of channels are going to start to play Final Fantasy VII remastered. And, maybe some of them will finish it and some of them will be like, the viewership's dipped, I'm moving to Doom Eternal. The viewership's dipping, I'm moving to, RimWorld just had a patch, blah, blah, blah. So for me personally, that's the way I prefer to build it.
Well, for lack of a better term, and I don't want to make people like shudder this, but it's like your brand, right? And so when
Yeah.
someone comes to your channel, they know, hey, you're not gonna run it at first harm's way. Not that there's any harm's way, but I think something you said is pretty important. I think it's a reason why, and I believe the same way. I think it's a reason why you and I will continue. I don't want to be cocky, but continue to be successful, because what you essentially said is you put the audience first, right? So it's not, hey, what would I love to play and let me play it forever, but you put the audience first. And if you know, you're aware that if someone's really hyped and supportive of you to play a game on Twitch and you get rid of it, it's putting yourself before the audience. And I think ultimately, you know, I think about that a lot, and I talk about it sometimes in terms of growth versus serving the audience that you have. So, and you know, and it's a balance, right? Of hey, I know if I can play this game, there'll be some new people there, but will the current audience like it? What does the current audience want to see? And I feel like for me, the way I approach it is like I've kind of built up like a brand, or at least an expectation of what the show is, which is Tarkov and a Souls or difficult like game. And so with that, I'm not looking to do a 180. Even if there's a game out there that I really want to play, if it doesn't fit that mold, I'm okay not playing it, because I found like the cadence. But also at the same time, like one of the, and we talked about this a lot, but one of the biggest things that keeps getting brought up in the Twitch show is playing Hollow Knight. And I think it's like people draw a lot of comparisons between Hollow Knight and Souls games, but it's just like, it's one of those things where it may be like a bully type situation, bully the game type situation, where it's like everyone wants to see this, but I know it's probably not a good fit, and I'd rather not do it than and have it bomb and then have to yeet it, than kind of take the chance to do it. But I don't know. I just feel like kind of the takeaway is, if you put your audience first, regardless of how big it is, I think you will always do well, because you're doing things for the right reason, which is, I don't want to say for the right reason, but you're taking care of the people that are there, as opposed to always looking for the next hottest trend.
Yeah. And I mean, people might ask, like, how do I reconcile like doing what I've always done that the audience likes, that is, you know, good for where I want my brand to go, but also what we just talked about, which is like trying new things. I mean, and I've thought about that myself, to be honest. I think there was a period on YouTube of like a few years where I was kind of like, paralyzed is the wrong word, but I was like, the audience expectation is that I'm like in this box. So I'm only going to put out the stuff that fits into this box, because if I put out something that's way in left field, people are going to be confused, or they'll be like, this isn't what I expected from you, blah, blah, blah. And I think it's a bad mindset to find yourself in. What you can do is experiment in like very lightweight ways. Like I'm putting out like 150 or 180 videos on YouTube a month. If like 5 of them are a little out of the pocket, I think that's totally fine. And that's how I've responded to people that are like, you know, I'll make like a tier list, and they're like, I'm not really a big fan of the tier list. And I'm like, that's fine. It's 1/39th of the content that I put out, right? Everything else that like made you get interested in the channel is there. And in fact, it's there in greater numbers than it's ever been before. But also, we got like a little experiment going off on the side. And if the experiment goes well and it gets a lot of views, that's awesome. And I feel stoked. And if it doesn't go so well and it tanks and people are like, this just wasn't funny, then, you know, okay, I put an hour or 2 hours into it. It's relatively low risk. And hopefully people found it entertaining. And if they didn't, that's fine. And on Twitch, it's just like, you know, I mean, you're mixing it in right now. You say you're playing 2 things, but every now and then you're throwing in like Bannerlord was what you've been playing. And I think having the ability to like mix in occasional content as like, you know, you're kind of dipping your toe into the water to see if the experiment will stick is totally fine. In the same way, like if you're like, oh, my audience expects me to play League of Legends because I'm a League of Legends channel, but you know, you recognize that maybe League of Legends in 5 years won't be as popular as it is today, or maybe it'll be twice as popular. You know, I honestly am just ignorant to that side, but you can be like, okay, I don't have to be like Tuesdays are no longer League day and totally tank my viewership on that day. But I could do, if I have a 5-hour stream, I could do 4 hours of League and then 1 hour of something else. Maybe that something else does really well for you, and then you can build like a second pillar of your channel. Maybe it sucks. You go, okay, next Wednesday, we're going to try something else in that 1 hour slot and just, work with it that way.
I think that's great advice and really great something that you've executed on. There was a tweet from an acquaintance kind of in the Twitch world that said, hey, like I want to start being a variety streamer. What do I do? And I don't feel I'm an expert in any sense of the way, but if I, have some insight, I sent this guy a DM. I'm like, hey, for me, because it was a guy in the Tarkov scene, I'm like, hey, for me, Tarkov started out like that. I was playing PUBG for 3 hours every show. And then I'm like, oh, let me play 2 hours of PUBG and let me play this game Escape from Tarkov that I did a few videos on and I liked. And that to me, like when I saw people be into it more than PUBG, I'm like, holy cow. And that would kind of set the foundation for what you said is like, I no longer played PUBG. It eventually shifted where I don't even play PUBG anymore, but it became the next kind of big thing in the show where it was that rare alignment of I loved it and the audience really liked it. And it was the same thing you talk about Bannerlords is like people are like, hey, you'll like this game, try it. And so I'm like, okay, it looks like a little RTS-y, not for me. And I played it and like it went from Tarkov to that. And I'm like, what the heck? And I really liked it. So it's just, but I'm not going to get rid of Tarkov. I'm not going to get rid of Neo or Dark Souls, but it's just kind of nice to be able to have that freedom. And like you said, if it doesn't go well, okay, it's not like people aren't going to run towards the exits. But I don't know. I think before, if there's someone listening right now, before you even get to that point, I do think you got to pick one lane. And I don't want to get to talking about like where you start, but pick one lane and stay in it. But it's got to be a lane that works, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not even sure what my advice is for like a new channel in that sense. We talked about it last week. I think whatever you do, framing it in a way that sets it apart. Like we were talking about, like the artists, if they were starting a Twitch channel last week, making it so like, hey, we're doing like a speed drawing challenge every day, or like, we're drawing a character that chat wants us to draw every day or something like that, instead of just, I'm going to sketch whatever I want.
Yeah.
I think that's good from a marketing standpoint. I think the same probably applies if you're starting a gaming stream to begin with. Like you have to give people some reason, not just to watch, but to click on your stream in the first place. If they've scrolled all the way down to the directory, and if your title is just like I can get away with it, not to be braggadocious, but my titles are not good from a discoverability standpoint.
Well, because you're above the fold, you're in the top. I mean, and overall on Twitch, you're above the fold, let alone whatever game you're in, you're going to be the number one.
Considering like, I mean, this is not what influences what I choose to play, but I don't play the games usually that there's a lot of competition on. Usually I'll be like one of like 4 channels live playing Super Mario Maker. So, it's not like I'm not in like the Counter-Strike Global Offensive directory and trying to compete against like, oh, ESL Katowice is on right now and it's got 250,000 viewers. But I definitely think like the marketing plays a role, but I don't know. It's tough. I don't know if I agree that you have to pick a lane, but I think I'm just honestly so far out of the starting phase that I don't have any meaningful feedback on that essentially at all, to be honest.
Is there a reason why you don't play like popular AAA titles on day one? You talk about like competing against Counter-Strike Go, or is it just it's not a conscious thing? It's just if you like the game, you play it.
Well, I mean, I have in the past, but not like. Well, we have to do almost like a history lesson here. So on YouTube, I was still figuring things out in like 2013, right? So in 2013, I thought that was the path that I was going to take, because it's the path that I saw other people take before on YouTube. That is like day one, you got your code from the publisher 2 days ago. As soon as the embargo pops, you're like, here's 6 parts of walkthrough. Here's 6 parts of a let's play. Here's like a video review. Here's how to like get Raiden's cyber sword on the first level, blah, blah, blah. And I did it, and it like didn't do very well, for one, and I didn't like making it that much. And also the feedback I got from the audience by and large is like, this isn't why we started watching you. We didn't watch you to be like, here's like walkthrough content where you put on like not to besmirch anybody, but like a game journalist voice, and you're like, do you want to find there's a lot of cool Easter eggs in Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance. So I kind of like, I pivoted off of that. I just found out that it didn't work that well for me. But I also like, I know those moments for me when they exist. Like there's unique to put it in the most cynical way possible, there's like unique market opportunities for me that I make sure to pay attention to. So like when Isaac DLC comes out, I know that that's like I should have like as much YouTube content that day, that week, that month, and I should probably also like stream the crap out of it as much as I can on that like opening couple of days. But I honestly, part of the reason I don't do it, I think, is because I don't have to, and so I don't really like to. Like Neo 2 came out, like you said. I was kind of inspired by your choice here. You could play Neo 2 right away, or you could use Neo 2 coming out as a springboard to be like, well, people will be looking to watch some more Neo content. It's a good opportunity for me to play the first one. And then if I like it, I can play the second one later. I mean, I just, to be honest, my only Twitch marketing experience is using my YouTube audience to come to Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
So I have no idea how discoverability works on Twitch at all. I imagine it's awesome if you're at the top of a directory for Tarkov the day the drops come out, or you know, you're the best Valorant player in the world when the Valorant beta starts. Like, I think that's going to be amazing, but probably not realistic for most people.
But you said you don't. You said you're fortunate because you don't have to do that, but also you don't want to do that. So what internally for you says, I don't want to play a game on day one?
It's less like an air of superiority. Like, I don't, like, we're above chasing trends or something like that. It's less that and more just like, I think it's a short-term play that doesn't necessarily carry drawbacks, but you're going, okay, like, I am going to restructure my entire content philosophy around, let me rephrase. I'm going to circle back to zero here. I think you get a lot of people, if it's not something that's in your normal wheelhouse, that are there exclusively to watch the game. And because you're the guy who's playing the game with the most viewers on day zero or day one, instead of people who are like, this content is good, which is fine. Mm-hmm. And you're going to siphon off a certain percentage of those viewers. Like no streamer is going to say no to like, hey, if you stream this today, you'll get 10,000 viewers that love your content, right? But I think you also, it changes the dynamic. Like, when having had streams that have exploded like out of nowhere, like one of my biggest streams of all time, we played the Titanfall beta in 2014.
Really?
And and we got like 9 or 10,000 concurrent viewers, and it was fun. I had a great time. And there might be some people in the community that are like, that was how I found you. But I think it's a small percentage. But also chat it turned like into a way different environment. And I think that's kind of like been a learning lesson for me going forwards is, you know, I look at this the same way you look at this, which is I'm not really hungry. I'm not starving for new viewers. So I don't have to make a short-term play. Like, I'm going to dedicate my entire channel to Final Fantasy VII Remaster when it comes out. We've already got that momentum. I would rather just play the stuff that works, mix in something a little light occasionally that keeps things fresh, and just keep moving forwards, building something that people like to come back to day in and day out, whether we're playing something that's brand new or something that has been around for a long time.
That's interesting you bring that up, because I when you were talking about having this wave of new people coming, I just, for whatever reason, I pictured like you're having a party with your friends, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, everyone come watch the pay-per-view fight. Everyone in the neighbor rushes in there, and like you can't find like your friends or the normal regulars that are there, which is kind of interesting. And I think the thing you said is that it may be a short-term play, but, and I'm trying to think why I don't do it. I think for me, like, because it'll be rare. Like, and you thought about, like, for you, when Isaac comes out with the last DLC or whatever, like, that'll be a big day for you, but that's something that's in your wheelhouse. For me, there's really only one game. And I'll say it like once a month, but I said when the Cuphead DLC comes out, I said, I don't care what we're going to drop everything and play it. But that's in the wheelhouse of people knowing that I like that, versus if I were to stop everything tomorrow and play Final Fantasy VII, it's just not the expectation. But in terms of doing that, the big philosophy for me is kind of like you said, I'm in it for the long haul. And I feel like it's almost like, and we've never really talked about this, but my kind of take on giveaways on the channel. I don't know if you've ever done them. I don't think I've ever really done them. If I did, it might have been in like 2012. But it's not, for me, the reason I don't do that stuff is exactly what you said. I just feel like it brings people in just for the giveaway and leaves, as opposed to, Like that's not what I want to build. But have you ever done any giveaways or anything?
No, I think like I might have given away like a few humble bundles in like 2010. And I did not pay 0 or 1 cent for them. I paid the above the average back then. Anyway, but I have the same philosophy. I think there's a right way and a wrong way to do giveaways. And it depends what you want as well. Like everything I'm saying here is kind of couched in the privilege of already kind of being in a really good spot, right? If you're a small channel and you're like, that's all well and good, but I get like 3 viewers. And, you know, when I do a giveaway stream, it costs me like $20, but I get 100 viewers. I can definitely see the temptation there. And I think it's a tool in the marketing toolbox that I'm fortunate not to use, because I agree with you. It feels weird to do.
Mhm.
But I think you can do a giveaway that gives back to your community. You could be like, hey, I'm going to give away like a couple copies of this game. There's delineations here too. Like sometimes developers are like, do you want codes to give away? And usually I'm like, you can drop them in chat, but I don't want them to give them away myself, because like it makes it seem like I'm getting the credit for something that you're doing. Like you're taking the hit, but I'm getting kudos for it. And I don't deserve that at all. Secondly, I don't want the whole stream to just be like I'm on a podium like throwing stuff out into the audience, right? But I think you can do it in a way that's like, hey, randomly, we're going to give away like copies of this game to people that are in chat. I think that's cool and maybe a way to give back to the community. And if you've got the codes yourself, that's a nice thing to do. If you're like, to participate in this giveaway, you have to follow me on Twitch, you follow me on Twitter, at reply to this with like blah, blah, subscribe to me on YouTube. That gives you one more entry, blah, blah, blah. That stuff, I'm like, yeah. I don't think it's necessarily scummy, but I think it's a little scummy, to be honest. But I think the real negative is you're going to get viewers that are only there to win the giveaway. So do you really want to have a chat that's like 500 viewers instead of 250, but the 250 that are additional are just like, please pick me, and a made up story about why they deserve to have the code over somebody else, you know?
Yeah.
It's about the environment that you want to create, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's just a field thing. And for you, like I have no judgment or anything that people that do that, but I feel the same way. It's just not for me. But I got myself in a little trouble, not a little trouble, but this past week talking about giveaways and stuff. And I just wanted to share this with you because I don't know why, but this happened. So I was playing Escape from Tarkov. Someone that hasn't been in the community just came in and said, hey, Dan, can you buy me the EOD version of Tarkov, which is the most expensive version? And it's not like, no, it wasn't a regular member of the community. I'd never seen the person before. And like, and I don't do this, but I kind of like poked fun at that person. I'm like, yeah, hey, come in my house. Come in my house. Uninvited, or and don't even say hello and say, hey, can you buy me this this pizza? I'm like, one, I don't know you, blah blah. So I went on this like kind of funny rant, and at the end I'm like, I'm just kind of joking, don't no big deal. And I felt bad. I'm like, okay, I'll buy it for you. And I'm like, so here I am, I just rewarded like some stranger. And for me I shouldn't have poked fun at that person. I'm like, okay, I got you. And I'm like, oh, you know what, if I'm gonna do this for a stranger, let me just do this for someone who's been a part of the community. Who wants one? I pick someone at random. Okay, so I'm like, okay, so I sign off, and I'm like, all right, hey, just send me a DM on Discord. I go to Tarkov. I'm like, all right, well, this upgrade's gonna be like, $40-$50 each. I'm like, no, it's like $120 each. I'm like, I didn't do my research, but ultimately, I did what I said I was gonna do. But it just kind of goes back to me. It's like I was running my mouth, and I shouldn't have done that. But in terms of giveaways and stuff, I'm much more apt to just do something right away than like premeditated, be like, oh, here's 10 Tarkov keys we're gonna give away. And I don't know. I think that's kind of cool to do it like surprisingly. Like if someone randomly, and don't do this, but if someone, a community member be like, hey Dan, I love Escape from Tarkov, blah blah blah, sometimes they'll just say yes, and I'll just buy it for the person because it feels good, and you like to do that stuff. But for me, like not there's anything wrong with it, but the premeditating and kind of setting up a big show for it just isn't, I don't know, it's not in my wheelhouse of something I want to do.
Yeah, no, I agree like 10,000%. Like my worst experience with it for sure was back in the insane times of like a Hearthstone beta. I got a Hearthstone beta code for myself. I got 2 codes from Blizzard to give away. when they were like platinum.
Yeah.
So I did a stream, and there were like, I had to sign a contract, I think, to get the 2 codes. There were like parameters for how to give them away. So I followed all the parameters. It had to be random, which I liked the best anyway, but it was a miserable experience. It's hilarious now to think of people like dying to play Hearthstone, literally.
But it was
like,
a big deal, like, but because you could stream it too. You know, if you had a code, you could stream it.
It was probably like, it was probably a golden ticket for a lot of streamers, I imagine. But so I had like, I don't know, 8,000 or 9,000 people watching, right? And I have 2 codes to give away. And I was like, I'm never gonna do this again, because it was just miserable. Chat was just exclusively begging for the code, which is why that's why I got the codes in the first place, was like a marketing play, I guess. And then I was getting like DMs and whispers, whatever Twitch had before whispers, like messages into my Twitch inbox that were like, please, like, I only have a week to live and my dying wish is to play Hearthstone, or like, my friend is sick, his dying wish is to play Hearthstone. And I'm like, oh my God, if that's real, I feel bad for you, but also like, I can't. And that has informed the way I've thought about it in the future as well. But like, I think that you kind of nailed it. Like, I don't mind, and I haven't done it, but it crosses my mind now and then of like, I can give back to the community. You know, I'm in a position where that's not hard to do. And I'm very thankful for that. So I really like the way that you did it, which is, you know, maybe you wouldn't do it for the stranger in the same way that you did it last week or 2 weeks ago. But you know, you didn't go on Twitter and go like, I'm giving away 2 copies of EOD Tarkov, come watch my stream. Instead, you were just like, you asked, and it'll be like a funny moment, and this is kind of like a cool thing that I can do. It like, in a way, it didn't really bring in anybody new that was exclusively there to inflate viewership for you. Instead, it was just like, this is something that'll make the community feel better, and whether or not they tell anybody about it, it just feels good. You know, It's not like a streamer that's like, hey, I'm going live and I'm giving away a PS4, and then you're like, I mean, I see what you're doing. Don't get me wrong. It's advertising. It's just marketing.
It's smart. I mean, it'll get you. It'll move the needle. But I don't know. I'm with you. I'd much rather like, and I do it a lot. And this is not what I was planning on saying, but like I do that stuff, but it'll just be in private Discord DM, or I just don't want that to be the focus. I just want to do it because I want to do it, and I'm grateful, not because I'm looking for anything else from it. And like I said, no judgment, because I know like we have people that are friends and do it. I don't care what anyone else does with their channel, but how I do things, I don't know. I just feel like if you do stuff that's out of the box in that regard, I think it can even work against you in terms of rubbing your community the wrong way. You know, yeah. I don't know. I didn't want, I mean, there was a question that they were asked last week that wanted to answer, and I don't know if we get to it now, but talking about like doing sponsored stuff, and when you do decide to monetize essentially your show or a video, and I don't want to shoehorn it in, but when you do that, like how do you rectify that in your head, and what is your process for deciding to take a sponsored opportunity?
Well, the first thing is, like, to an extreme degree, product reputability. Like I say, so I have a manager / publicist who forwards sponsorship requests to me. I'm sure like 80% of the sponsorship requests that come into the inbox don't even make it to me in the first place, because David just goes, this is super not a fit. And then the other like 20% that make it through, I say no to at least 85 to 90%. So it's the product has to be a fit in the first place. And usually that means like a good game. So that's step one. If the game is good, it makes it easier to do. And I'd rather take a rate hit and take a lower sponsorship in order to play a game that's good. Now, of course, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, we have a huge budget, call me. So that's step one. And then the other one is like, it depends what they're asking for and how they want it done. I put a huge premium on sponsors that allow me to just do what I'm doing, but instead of playing what I would normally play, I play their game instead. So I've had sponsorship requests come in where they're like, we want you to have a banner in the top right. And then, we'd like you to unbox our product live on the stream and then talk about like how it worked for you and stuff like that. And I'm like, that's gonna cannibalize the content that I make. So I would rather not do that unless we can do it in a funny way. But when a game developer or publisher is like, hey, you like roguelites, Curse of the Dead Gods was a really good example. Curse of the Dead Gods was like, hey, our game's coming out March 3rd. We want you to post like a video in the last week of February and then do a stream on launch day. And I was like, this seems like a perfect fit. It's a roguelite that's already in my wheelhouse anyway. It's good. And there's no like, hey, don't mention competitors' names. Don't, keep a tone that is non-controversial and stuff like that. So I guess to distill it, I mean, it's a spectrum. It's like a graph. The higher the budget is, the more you can get away with. Absolutely. But simultaneously, at like a realistic budget, the more creative freedom you give me, the better. And also the more it is of a natural fit for my channel, for sure. I think both of us, I think you might even be a little bit more selective than me on sponsorships, but I have never, or maybe like once or twice, done a sponsored deal that I felt was not a natural fit. And the natural fit stuff just goes way, way better.
What was an example of one that you did that like might have been high in the bag, but low on the good fit?
Lineage 2, for sure.
Was that the mobile one?
That was the mobile one, yeah. For sure.
But I was like, did that turn into a meme though? It was like funny, right? Like people enjoyed it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, to some extent, like even Champions of Fire is kind of on that, right? Because it's not like competing in a mobile game esports tournament that requires me to be away from home for like 4 or 5 days. And also like, they're throwing these weird like startup money parties that are not a cultural fit for me at all to begin with. And then, but we turned it into a meme by doing it, which was nice.
I mean, the Champions of Fire thing, that was like, to me, it was like pentathlon levels of hype. Like when people knew that you were competing, it was like, I think they who created the event, they got what they wanted in terms of like a community invested in it. But I think maybe invested in from their end, invested in the wrong thing. Like we were all invested in you winning and doing well and having fun, not necessarily
the games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean that was the one that's probably the most out of the pocket, and like that's influenced the way that I've thought about sponsored deals in the future, or since then I should say. And it's not like that didn't even go badly. I think it went as expected.
Champions of Fire or Lineage?
Lineage. Mm-hmm. But after that, definitely like I've said no to a lot more things, just because I placed a little bit more importance, I guess, or a little bit more focus on maintaining the integrity of the show instead of I mean, there's no way to say it without besmirching some other creators, but there's definitely creators who are like, when they go live, you're like, you don't have an overlap with this product at all. Like, well, you're pimping this thing that 100% you've never used before in your entire life. And similarly, like I follow some streamers like indirectly, and sometimes they like won't be live for like a week, and then the one day a week they're live, they're doing like a sponsored thing. And I would feel like if I were a member of the community, I would take a little bit of offense to that. I would be like, oh, I guess our default level of support wasn't good enough for you to show up Monday to Saturday, but on Sunday, this company, gave you a check. So you said it's worth coming to work. So I think that's kind of been part of it for me, is that I want sponsorship stuff to be a natural fit, but I also want it to be rare enough that it feels like we are being selective instead of just like we're saying yes to everything.
Yeah, I've been surprised a little bit with the community on my end, is that when this Tarkov drop stuff happened, right? Everyone knew there was way more viewership, and you'd go into some communities, and because of that, you would see like communities like calling out for ads because like just because they knew like the numbers were so high, which I think is cool. And I think, but stuff like that I think comes from kind of to come full circle about like respecting the audience and delivering what they want. And my take on it is very similar, is that it's got to always, number one, it can't take away, if I do a sponsor deal, it can't take away from the regularly scheduled program. So for example, it's a 3 or 4 hour show. it's going to be a 5-hour show now. It's not going to be, I'm not going to take an hour away of what is normally there. And the second thing with you is just a good fit is that, I'm not going to play an RTS game or a MOBA regardless of what's going on. And I think, trust me, I mean, there's opportunities when, you get a sponsored deal, like, man, is that the real number they want you to play? Like, it's like, wow. But you're like, I don't know. I just feel like, and it's no judgment. I think there's people that you can do that and short-term burnout and make a lot of money. But I don't know. I just don't, that's not my take on it, is that if I do things the right way and I can sprinkle those in and they make sense, then it's awesome. And I think people, like I did and the Twitch bounties are a little bit different, and we can't talk a ton about it, but if there's a Twitch bounty that is like, hey, like I did one today and it was like, hey, have this overlay up or talk about this Xbox Games Pass with AMD, but you can play whatever you want. So to me, it's like, that's a no-brainer, right? It wasn't a no-brainer because I thought about it. I'm like, hey, is this intrusive? How am I going to do these talking points? And I'm like, well, if I could play it during Bannerlord, then let's do it.
Well, and there's a real advantage to I click a button and I agree to it. And then when it pays out in my normal, pay stub, instead of we need you to sign this PDF, send it back. Oh, they want to make an amendment to it. And then 90 days later, you invoice them and it shows up like in the mail. For sure. Yeah.
But I know that's my take on it. But I think it is really interesting in terms of navigating that, because there are some times that I don't know if you feel this. There are some times when, and if it feels this strongly, like I feel bad that I'm like putting a number on the audience. And I don't know if you feel this way, but, and so if that feeling is really strong, I stop and I don't even consider it. And that's something that I struggle with a little bit, because I just don't ever want the audience to feel disrespected. But I think it may err along the same lines of kind of your vlog that I always reference back to, about you kind of coming to the realization of, hey, this is what I do. And I think sometimes, I'm not there yet, but I feel like a lot of the community is really supportive and want you to do that stuff because it allows you to do more and create more of what they already like. But that's something I struggle with. Do you ever think about that at all?
Yeah, I mean, I do, and I think I reconcile it the same way that you've done it so far, which is that I think if you do the sponsorship in a tasteful way, if it's not like I would never take a deal that's like, we're going to give you 20% of the virtual currency that somebody buys in our game. I would feel pretty bad about that for sure. But as long as you do it in a tasteful way, it's as much of a natural fit as possible. You're not inundating with people with sponsorship or sponsored content on like a daily or weekly basis. And then beyond that, not taking away from the content that they already like. Like last Wednesday, I had a sponsored activation for a game called Iron Danger, which is a good game.
That was that XCOM looking game you're playing?
Yeah. So I was like, they wanted 2 hours of live content on a Wednesday. It's a tight squeeze, to be honest. But I was like, I'm not going to take 2 hours away from the NLSS, because if I were somebody who, like, if I wanted to watch the Super Bowl and they were like, well, it's 3 hours long, but like 2 hours of it is just going to be the Katy Perry concert. I would be the first 2 hours too. I would be like, screw this. But if they were like, Katy Perry's playing a 2-hour concert before the show, and then you're going to get the normal show anyway, I might put it on.
Yeah.
I might have it in the room while I'm eating some snacks, So I think as long as you're giving people what they want, what they came to you for in the first place, and then you're not being like, oh, well, the sponsored thing is going to take 3 hours away from the thing that you already like, I think that's fine. And I think that's really what it comes down to. Like the putting a price on the audience, you're right. It's cynical, but it is kind of, to some extent, that's what it is. But I don't think you're doing anything wrong by your audience's standards. If you're not manipulating them, please go buy this game because they sponsored me. Instead, just like, hey, if you like what you see, go check it out, or wishlist or whatever. And then B, like, if you're not taking anything away from them, to basically just funnel it directly into yourself. That's the way I choose to look at it.
And it was kind of cool today, just to talk about like doing the right thing, I guess, is that when I was talking about this, I don't want to talk about the product, but there's a couple people that are like, oh, in the community, like, oh, I already have this, it's really good. And then they're telling me stuff about it that's really good. And then you came in, you're like, yeah, I got it too. It's really good.
Yeah, Game Pass is really good.
And I'm like, all right, then I guess it was, a pretty good decision. But no, and that kind of, it feels good that way, where it's not like that felt like a non-sellout type thing, because it just was a natural fit. And then on top of it, like, because I didn't know what Xbox Game Pass was. I had to read about it. I'm like, oh yeah, it sounds cool, but I didn't check it out or anything. But anyways,
and look, like, there's a difference too. Don't get me wrong. The beautiful thing for a sponsor deal is what the bounty board looked like 3 years ago, 2 years ago, where it was just like, hey, a great game just came out. You might have already played it, but check this one out. We're going to pay you to play it. It's going to deposit automatically with the rest of your payment. And we're going to give you a code so you don't have to buy it or email the developer or publisher. And the code will show up in like under 24 hours. That was the dream. So when you hear stories about people that are like, when Apex Legends came out, Respawn or EA or whatever organization outside handles that, they were giving people like fat sacks, canvas bags of money with a $sign painted on it. You're like, that's amazing. It's already a great game. It's already what people want to watch, and you're going to pay me to play it. That's the dream, of course. But if you're in a situation where, maybe doing a sponsored deal here or there is the difference between being full-time and not being full-time, I'm very sympathetic to that. And I understand, I'm lucky to not be in that position where I can say no to a deal and not lose sleep over like, oh, would this, allow me to make my mortgage payment this month or something like that. So I'm very, very sympathetic to that.
To wrap things up, you talk about the Golden Bounty era. I'm going to tell you, I think what was from the Twitch side of things, the best bounty I ever did, best game bounty. And then I think you and I are going to say the same thing about the best other bounty. But for me, I think the best one I ever did was Sekiro. It's like, hey, play Sekiro for an hour. It's like you get the game for free. It's a game I like, I know I'm going to like.
Dude, I got to tell you, 2019 was a golden era for this. And I can't believe how lucky I got. Not only did I have the Sekiro bounty, but also like a week before the Sekiro bounty, I had another third-party activation with a marketing company with Activision. So I already got Sekiro to play it for the sponsored deal outside of it. Then like 3 days later, the bounty showed up and I was like, it's like the game of the year. And like, I don't want to, because like this is a conversation that we really would have to have a guest on to understand. But I'm like, you're wasting your money. Everybody's going to play this anyway and everyone's going to love it. I mean, a little encouragement is nice, and I'm sure it does move the needle as well. But I was like, man, you are paying me something for doing something I was already going to do. It's beautiful.
So Sekiro is probably your best one. And
it's tight. I pretty much every bounty I've done, I've really liked, because I say no to the ones that don't feel like they would be a good fit, to be honest. Mm-hmm. MLB The Show was really good. That was a good one. Yeah. That was a lot of fun. And I mean, like when the Hearthstone single player content came out, I did that as well. I thought that was good. The Hunter was one of the ones I did in like December. I'm already playing the game anyway, so it was like a perfect fit. For games, I think those are probably up there. Like bounties, you're actually super excited to do because you're like, I'm already playing this to begin with.
And then the golden era of the NFL trailers. I mean, never forget about.
This is, again, we shouldn't talk too much. I guess,
no, we can't talk
the contents of the bounty board, but I was like, man, every week there's like multiple NFL bounties.
We would set it up at the end of Unity, so we'd end Unity and we would orchestrate. Okay, Ryan's gonna host Austin. Austin's gonna hold Mel's gonna host Dan, and we're all gonna do.
Dick's Sporting Goods is pretty good as well. I actually, I really like I hope they do more activations that. It's not in Canada yet, but for American creators, like because Amazon owns Twitch, there's a lot of like Amazon Prime bounties, like, hey, watch the trailer for Hunters, or like watch the trailer for Jack Ryan. There was an activation directly through Twitch that was like, watch any Amazon Prime show using the watch party feature that they have for American creators. So you can literally like have your cam up, put the video feed in the background now. It used to just be you'd have to only have the video feed up. You can commentate like over top of the episode, and you and your chat can watch it together. I'm like, that's the dream. That's like Mystery Science Theater 4000. Like you can watch a show. Can you imagine? And this is on Netflix. Can you imagine watching like Tiger King? Or like 90 Day Fiance, we're having a chat in the side. That's like the dream as far as content
that'd
goes.
that was like pretty limited, but that's like you talking about that. Imagine like a show that you love, like 90 Day Fiance, where both get to sit there and riff off of it. I mean, and like we don't have, it's like another layer of like when you play the game, you got to focus on that, and then you got to focus on being entertaining. But I mean, just to be able to commentate on Marcel and you know,
the jokes would be at another level because you're not distracted.
Well, speaking of being distracted, thank you guys so much for tuning in today. Hope you guys enjoyed the podcast. I'm gonna read off a review from. Actually, I'm not going to because I have Discord up. But I was gonna read a review off Stitcher. But we want to thank you guys so much for leaving all the reviews on iTunes, Stitcher, rating the show. Thank you guys so much for supporting it. If you haven't and you like watching, you want to see us laugh and like do hand gestures, check out the VOD on youtube.com/Northernlion. But always, we will see you guys next week, Tuesday, 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for the next episode. Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys then. Later.